County of Renfrew, Township of Horton, Whitewater Region, and Bonnechere Valley, all undertaking a joint but separate transportation master plan. So tonight we have our consultants here from Aegis, a few representatives, and without further ado, I will ask them to introduce each of themselves and then take us away through the presentation.
Thank you, John. Hi, everyone. I'm François Tomeo. I'm from Aegis, and I'm accompanied by a transportation planner from Aegis, Anya Nawaz, and also Narayan from the firm Mabicon. That is our partner for this project. So today, as John mentioned, is the second Public Information Center, and we're going to talk about the Transportation Master Plan for the town of Arnprior. So, oops. Okay. So first, 4 things to note. Please mute your microphones unless you're speaking. Important, this presentation is recorded. So there will be a question period that will follow the presentation. You also can submit your questions through the chat. And if during the question period you wish to speak, please don't hesitate to raise your hands, the reactions, and unmute when called on. So really today we want to hear from you, since your involvement is key to the success of this master plan. This master plan is for you, so we want to make sure that you're comfortable, and if there's anything that raises concern, we would like to know. So today, that Public Information Center is used to present information about the master plan and provide you the chance to say, what you think, and speak with us, the project team, or the township and the town. Sorry, and remember also that if questions arise later, there's always opportunities to send us your questions. After, there's going to be a few weeks after this presentation where we will take questions, and we will try to answer you as quickly as possible. So the Transportation Master Plan, what is it? It's a long-term strategy that guides the planning, expansion, and management of a multimodal transportation system. So the multimodal is very important. So it's not only about cars, it's about all modes of transportation. It also provides policies and strategy that align with the town of Arnprior's growth and support its vision for the future. So one thing to note is that this TMP is completed in parallel with other master plans, among them the county of Renfrew, but also the township of Bonnechere Valley, Horton, and Whitewater region. So the TMP is conducted in accordance with the master planning process as is prescribed in the Class A municipal road projects. And this master plan addresses phase 1 and 2 of the 5-phase municipal Class CA process, including public information centers and assessment on alternatives. Sorry. So again, we're following a process that is prescribed by the province. So really, what you see on the right is a diagram showing this process. So the TMP addresses mostly is the phase 1 and 2. Phase 1 being problem and opportunity, and phase 2, the development and evaluation of alternative solutions. So really, we're meeting those requirements as part of this plan. So some basic data that most of you must know already, but just a refresher. So town of Arnprior is a lower tier municipality and is in the easternmost. I'm not sure what we wanted to say in there, but yeah. So
it's the easternmost municipality in the county of Renfrew.
Okay. So as per the 2021 statistics, the land area of Arnprior is 13.04 square kilometers and population density of around 740 people per square kilometer. It's also the second most populous municipality in the county of Renfrew, with a population of just over 9,600 as per the 2021 census data, which is 9.5% increase from 2016. Yes, and the population is forecasted to reach 11,700, just a bit over 11,700 by 2036. So really, this is a summary of the main steps of the plan. So the existing conditions assessment was presented as part of the PIC 1. Then what we're focusing most of our attention today is the identification and evaluation of alternatives. There's the network assessment. There's the policies and the site standard updates. Active transportation is a big part of this plan, and the development of alternatives and their evaluation. And obviously today, the PIC number 2, which kind of wraps that. After that, it will be really the documentation and finalization of the plan that will be presented to council later. 2 horizons, 2029 and 2041 for the future conditions. So phase 1 consultation recap. I think it's your part.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you, Francois. So the first Public Information Center was held back in March of 2024. Much of what we heard at that meeting indicated exploring opportunities for extending the transit network to the town and also considering an option for rural transit. Also, we heard about improving active transportation connectivity to key destinations and enhancing the safety for all road users. This feedback that we received, we basically used in part to help shape the recommendations that we're sharing today, and we hope that it is reflected in the town's future transportation network. So the objective of this Public Information Center is similar to the first, but with a focus towards the actual recommendations and findings of the Transportation Master Plan. We've already provided a brief recap of the study process, and we'll present the preliminary recommendations we've developed. And as mentioned previously, look for feedback from all of you. I should also note that while I mentioned the Transportation Master Plan itself is relatively high level, we invite any comments at all with respect to any problem areas you are aware of, like intersection with heavy congestions or safety issues, unsafe crossings, any speeding concerns, or whatever the case may be. These types of problems might not be specifically addressed within the study, but they can indicate broader problems that we could address through this study. So through our review of the future conditions within the town, we've highlighted some of the key challenges and opportunities. In terms of the challenges, the town has maintained a growing population over the last census period, and ensuring the transportation network keeps pace with this growth is critical for the success of the town. The town is currently highly dependable on driving, about 88% of trips being completed with cars. So there is a significant opportunity for accommodating other modes of transportation. This is especially true when we consider the fact that the town, like many other municipalities across Ontario, has an aging population. So it is important to provide safe and efficient alternative modes of transportation for this population. So while on the most part, the town transportation network is relatively safe, there are a few areas we identified with room for improvement. Pedestrian crossings, and appropriate active transportation facilities, respective of the roadside environment, poor intersection sightlines, and poor roadway conditions being some of the key areas for improvement. We also noted that poor road conditions and lack of roadway maintenance is a major concern within the town, especially during winter months. So in terms of the opportunities, there are some key areas the town can leverage, particularly in terms of road safety and provision of appropriate infrastructure. The town can make strategic investments in road safety initiatives, including public education, technologies, and infrastructure improvement. And law and enforcement can also help make streets safe for all people, particularly vulnerable road users like pedestrians and cyclists. Furthermore, the town also has the potential to fund and deliver facilities in partnership with the County of Renfrew. There is also an opportunity to update the town's road design practices to guide discussions around the priorities of different areas and land uses, as well as update the decision-making practices to consider the operation and maintenance costs associated with project decisions instead of just considering the upfront capital costs of the service or infrastructure. So part of the master planning process is identifying various alternatives. So these set the general theme of the study going forward and direct the overall recommendations for policy and infrastructure investment. As part of this study, we developed a total of 4 alternatives that can be shown on the screen here. So alternative 1 includes doing nothing. The town would not invest in any new infrastructure improvements and just focus on maintaining its existing network. Alternative 2, the status quo. This generally reflects the existing conditions. The town would continue its current development and generally improvements would be in direct response to that development. Moving on to alternative 3, which is the road network strategy. This would put emphasis on improvements to the town's road network, predominantly focusing on improving traffic operations and accommodating motor vehicles. And lastly, alternative 4, which is strategic investments. This would put emphasis on strategic road network capacity improvements while also promoting and enhancing the active transportation network and explore the possibility of developing a public transit system. And this was our preferred alternative for this study. So in order to assess the list of alternatives that I talked about and select the preferred one, we developed a number of strategic priorities, which are based on various planning and policy documents published by the town, the county, and the province. These priorities include things like mobility options, so meeting different mobility needs. Does the network foster a good sense of community? Is the network safe for all users regardless of age, ability, or mode choice? Does the network help mitigate the negative impacts to the natural environment? And does the network promote economic and financial prosperity for the town and its residents? So these are all considerations for determining a preferred solution. And after looking through the strategic priorities, as mentioned earlier, we picked alternative 4 for this study, which was strategic investments, and also developed a vision statement, which was that the town of Arnprior will provide a safe, accessible, sustainable, and efficient transportation system that meets the connectivity needs of its growing and evolving population and businesses while supporting a vibrant and healthy community. So now looking into the future forecasted traffic volumes. We use the existing average annual daily traffic or AADT volumes and projected them out to the 2034 horizon year by applying a 1.75% growth rate up to 2029 and then a 1.5% growth rate up to 2034. So these volumes are critical in decision making, especially when we consider things like cycling facilities, network improvements, traffic calming. So really for any decision relating to the road network, the AADT is one of the first considerations. Now moving on to future road classification. So the town's official plan outlines its road classification system, which includes local, collector, and arterial roadways. While the official plan provides some description and general requirements from these types of roadways, the town generally does not have a developed policy which would ensure these roadways are
I had to go set up somewhere else.
designed and function as intended. Development
Nope.
of a road classification policy specific to the town is critical to ensuring its roads function in its best interest and are able to accommodate growth. While in principle, the current hierarchical classification system employed by the town is adequate, there are currently minimal standards attached to these classification. So through this study, there is opportunity to provide recommendations for further refinement of the network better suited to the town. And based on the review of existing and the Transportation Association of Canada definitions, which are the TAC definitions, it is recommended that the town adopt the following road classification system, which includes local roads, collector roads, arterial roads, and special character roads. So the term special character road is used to describe a road corridor with unique natural, cultural, historical, and recreational attributes or qualities that differentiates the facility from others in the network. These roads are identified by their distinctive structural, topographic, and visual characteristics and cultural or historical significance. Recognizing their function, it is recommended that Elgin Street from Daniel Street to Madawaska Street, as well as John Street from McGonigal Street to Madawaska Street be classified as special character roads, which can be shown on the screen right here. Some road sections were also recommended to be upgraded from local to collector roads within the town, which include DeCosta Street from Hartney to Madawaska Boulevard and Edward Street from Edie Street to William Street. So based on our analysis and feedback from the town and public, we have recommended some operational improvements to the road network, focusing on enhancing the safety, efficiency, and connectivity for all users. The recommended upgrades aim to address current challenges, such as poor road conditions, limited accessibility, while also preparing for future demands. So the first recommendation is to convert Ottawa Street to a one-way street with on-street parking for pickup and drop-off with contraflow bike lanes implemented for safety for cyclists. Another recommendation is to reduce the conflict points on William Street with the Algonquin Trail crossings, as several minor streets intersect with William Street and cross the Algonquin Trail in very close proximity to the intersections. So it is recommended that all collector road trail crossings be maintained and the local street crossings be converted to cul-de-sacs to ensure safety for pedestrians and cyclists. So now to talk about the active transportation and transit component, I'm going to pass it off to Narayan.
Thanks, Hania. So for looking at active transportation, as Hania mentioned, that one of our big priorities was to improve the conditions for walking and cycling. So those are the main types of active transportation within the town, as well as the newer technologies, micromobility, such as e-bikes. So in the town, we have a few challenges. So notably, Arnprior is relatively isolated in terms of the distance to other adjacent communities. So for the most part, walking and cycling is not particularly competitive for going to other towns from Arnprior or vice versa. Arnprior, of course, has very wintry winters, so there's a lot of snow and it's quite cold for a lot of the year. So that does have implications about how much winter maintenance is going to be done on the active transportation facilities, so sidewalks, paths, and potentially bike lanes. However, there are a lot of opportunities in Arnprior as well. So most notably, the town is physically fairly small. So it has a diameter of about 4 kilometers, which is about 15 minutes by bike. So pretty much all trips within the town are within cycling distance if there were good, comfortable, safe cycling infrastructure, for example. And we also noticed from the census data that 50% of the commutes from Arnprior residents are actually within Arnprior. So all of those are within cycling distance. So the bottom line is that traveling within the town using active transportation has a lot of opportunities. I think the current mode share for people who are commuting within the town is about 10% walking, which is quite high, actually. That's on par with some larger cities. But the cycling mode share is very low. I think it's around 1 or 2%. So there's a potential to increase that percentage, which would allow us to reduce the amount of investment that is required in much more expensive types of infrastructure like road widenings, as well as the community benefits of preserving the character of the town without having lots of really big roads with lots of traffic on them going through the town. So the active transportation improvements that were identified for pedestrians was primarily related to gaps in the sidewalk network. So the goal that we're aiming for, as we proposed as part of the master plan, is to have sidewalks on both sides of arterial roads, so major roads and collectors, and to have sidewalks on at least one side of local streets that are through streets. Local streets that are not through streets, so basically cul-de-sacs, don't necessarily need sidewalks if they had low enough speeds and volumes that it would be comfortable for people to walk in the road or on the roadway. I'd like to highlight a few of these gaps that we identified that are particularly notable as far as the pedestrian network. White Lake Road and Daniel Street have a number of gaps, particularly around the 417. Madawaska Boulevard has a lot of gaps at the east end, although the town is currently working to resolve a lot of those. Baskin Drive has gaps along a lot of its length, and Stay Court is also a notably absent from the sidewalk network. So those are particularly notable omissions from the current pedestrian network that should be priorities to improve. For cycling infrastructure, there are two main types of infrastructure that are proposed as part of the master plan. So the first is quiet street routes. So these are basically just local streets. So they're not going to have a dedicated cycling path or bicycle lane. The way that they would become efficient and pleasant cycling corridors is simply by maintaining low traffic volumes and low traffic speeds. So this is primarily using traffic calming. In some situations on more major roads, the plan does actually propose dedicated cycling facilities, which are cycle tracks. So that means bicycle paths that are only for bicycles, and then there would be a separate sidewalk, or multi-use path, which is a path which is shared between both cyclists and pedestrians, and that would be used in areas with lower pedestrian and cycling volumes. In addition to that, we have, of course, the core of the network, which is the Algonquin Trail, which travels right through the middle of the town, quite conveniently providing a lot of connectivity for travel within the town. And as part of that, as part of the county master plan, we did identify improvements to the trail, such as improving the trail crossing types at intersections, as well as improving the trail paving quality. So there are a few spots in the master plan where there are still multiple options to resolve, which would have to be looked at in more detail than the master plan level. So while we did show a line on the map, it could actually be potentially on an adjacent street. So the most notable one is the main corridor north-south through the town, nominally along Daniel Street. So the first option, the most sort of straight or obvious option, would be to have a cycling route straight down Daniel Street, which is a county road. So what that would entail in the longer term would be separated bicycle lanes. But the challenge of that option is that due to the physical right-of-way width, both in terms of the street that's there now and in terms of the property that the county has, that would likely result in the loss of left turn lanes, which would have impacts on the traffic delays and traffic capacity of the corridor. And as of course, reconstruction, if there were to have, if the street were to be upgraded to physically separate cycling from motor traffic, that would have quite a considerable cost to build. Conversely, maintaining the traffic capacity that's there now, while also adding bicycle paths, would be even more expensive and would exceed the physical space that's available there. So alternative B, if the goal is to make sure that the route is comfortable for people of all ages and abilities, would be effectively to convert John Street from a collector street to a local street. So what that would entail is in this option, the block adjacent to the Algonquin Trail could be converted to a pathway or for an otherwise restricted so that private cars can't drive down that particular block at the Algonquin Trail. The remainder of the street would remain as it is today, except with the addition of traffic calming to make sure that traffic is respecting the speed limit. So of course, the advantage here is it's incredibly cheap to build. Restricting traffic at the Algonquin Trail can easily be done with temporary materials. But of course, the downside is that John Street would no longer be unavailable for motor traffic to cut across the town. So those are the big trade-offs, and there's obviously a lot more detail to be gone into in terms of these two options for the north-south cycling connection across the town. And to give some illustration of what a quiet street route would look like, this is an example of a quiet street route in Vancouver. They are basically an ordinary local street, but in order to make sure that traffic volumes are low enough that people of all ages and abilities would feel comfortable cycling on the street, they might need to have some kind of physical restriction, such as the one I just described at the Algonquin Trail. So vehicle access would be maintained to all properties. The recommended speed limit for this kind of street would be 30 kilometers an hour. And as I mentioned, traffic calming to ensure that traffic is going that speed. No, that's good. Next. Cycle tracks and physically separated bicycle lanes, which would be more the Daniel Street option if that were the longer term Daniel Street option in any case. Would be physically separated pathways, which typically in an urban setting such as the town of Arnprior would ideally be one way, just to keep the traffic interaction simpler for drivers turning across the bike path. And they'd be physically separated as shown on the images here. So the other thing we looked at for alternative transportation modes is the transit connection from Arnprior to Ottawa. So prior to 2016, prior to 2020, there was a commuter service that operated from Arnprior to Ottawa once a day to downtown Ottawa. And at the time, there was a lot of bus priority infrastructure in the city of Ottawa, which actually made that a fairly competitive option because once the bus got to the city, within the city, it actually had dedicated bus highways, the transit ways, that allowed it to bypass traffic and get downtown, in many cases faster than driving. However, starting in 2016, a lot of that bus infrastructure has been permanently decommissioned in order to convert it to LRT. The O train, which of course means that buses can't use it anymore. And there's still a few bits and pieces of infrastructure in place, but most of it has been decommissioned. So one thing that's also worth noting that has actually come up since we made these slides is that a company has introduced a very similar commuter bus service a month ago. So that does exist, but it's not reflected in these slides. Yeah. So when we were looking at the potential demand for this commuter service, we looked at the census data, which unfortunately is from 2021, so that was still during the pandemic, but we did look at the 2016 data as well as trends in travel to try to get a sense of what the travel would be in 2025 in the present. But the bottom line is that we're looking at not a huge number of potential transit riders, simply because of this, largely simply because of the size of the town and the dispersion of where they're heading within the city of Ottawa. So potentially 1 to 2 bus loads of people would be a fairly optimistic number of passengers. Next. So instead of the town of Arnprior investigating its own commuter service to Ottawa, our recommendation is actually as part of the Renfrew County's transportation master plan that there be a county-wide transit service, or at least county-led transit service, which would pass through Ottawa and also connect, pass through Arnprior and also connect to Ottawa. And the advantage of doing it as part of a singular county system is that the operational cost is much lower than having 2 separate systems. For example, if the county were operating from Arnprior to Petawawa, and then the town were operating from Arnprior to Ottawa, it's more efficient to just have a single service operated at a higher level of government. So the bottom line, as part of the transportation master plan, there is not specifically any recommendations for the town to pursue transit, but at the county level, we do recommend that.
Okay, thank you, Narayan. As part of the TMP as well, we prepared some policies, and the first one was an always stop control policy. One of the more popular trends we see across a lot of different municipalities is the usage of always stops as a sort of fix-all solution for speeding and various other safety concerns. But implementing always stops for traffic calming is strictly forbidden in the Highway Traffic Act, and generally speaking, implementing unwarranted always stops can actually lead to more negative impacts than they would solve. So the reality is that many of the always stops currently implemented throughout the town do not meet the industry warrants. So we have developed a policy which reinforces the standards and warrant processes for always stops to ensure they're appropriately used. I should also note that the concerns leading to their implementation may be valid, but we must look at better alternatives for addressing these concerns like traffic calming or geometric changes. Another common issue we see across different municipalities is non-standard pedestrian crossings. So things like courtesy walks or unposted crossings with inadequate signage. Another concern is inadequate crossing protection types, so using school crossing signage when maybe a pedestrian crossover is warranted. So we've developed a pedestrian crossover policy which streamlines the process for identifying pedestrian crossover locations and ensuring the proper facilities are provided. Here we prepared a map of the locations where the always stop signs were unwarranted based on the policy we prepared, and we recommend they be removed and replaced with temporary traffic calming measures. It is recommended, however, to complete updated traffic counts before the final implementation. We also conducted warrants for PXOs based on the policy we prepared, and it was noted that John Street at Ottawa Street, the John Street Hospital, Victoria Street at Harriet Street, and ED at Allen Drive warranted PXOs, which locations are shown on the map here. So we also prepared a traffic calming policy for the town as part of the TMP. We look to traffic calming to effectively reduce the design speed of the roadway to reflect its desired operating speed. Traffic calming can include various temporary or permanent measures, which essentially, through physical or educational means, lessen the level of comfort with traveling at higher operating speeds. The policy provides a clear and concise process for assessing and implementing traffic calming. The policy also provides guidelines for how to implement the traffic calming measure. So it would recommend implementation in a phased approach, whereby the less expensive and intrusive temporary measures are implemented first, and if they don't work, physical measures would be considered. The guideline outlines an extensive list of options which may be appropriate in some cases, but for most cases, we've recommended some preferred measures which include curb extensions, raised crosswalks, and speed humps. We also recommend some potential reduced speed areas and community safety zones based on the location of community facilities and schools. The general approach was to recommend 30 km/h reduced speed zones around local roads with the presence of community facilities, which are basically shown on the map here on the screen. So that concludes the overall presentation. We have prepared 3 poll questions that I will launch now, and once those are done, we can talk about next steps for the study. So on your screen, you're going to see a pop-up that says polls, and you will see the first question, which says, did you attend PIC 1 for the town? And there's a small arrow at the bottom where you can toggle to question 2, which would be, do you think the recommendations balance community needs and feasibility effectively? And then the last question, which is, do you have any other suggestions or concerns about transportation in your community? So once you've answered these, you can press submit, and then.
So, and yeah, some people say that the poll is not working for them. Are there many? Can you raise your hand if the poll is not working for you? Just to make sure that if most of you. So Daniel, Alexis.
I see people
Lisa.
responding.
So yeah, we have 3, 4 for who is not working, unfortunately. Not sure why, so we're sorry for that. Now there's 3 ends, maybe one of the 4 worked. So again, it's technology. Sometimes it works. Most of the time it works, but sometimes there are difficulties. Good news is for the majority, it works. So sorry for those who that didn't work. So again,
why that could be.
Yeah, but and yeah, it's fine if we cannot make it work. We can still look at the results quickly.
Okay, yeah. Let me share the results here.
Yeah. Right now we're still sharing the presentation.
Yeah, I'm just trying to go to where the results are here. Okay.
Okay. So the good news is that most of you, the majority, were there to the first public information center. So that's nice to see.
Yep.
So, do you think the recommendations balance community needs and feasibility effectively? So, so the good news is that no one said no. That's good for us. But there's some that there's a third that have some concerns. So we'd like to hear from you. What are your concerns? So maybe we will try to address them in the final version of the plan. And so do you have any suggestions or concerns about transportation in your community? So nothing that's a lot of things, but nothing that stands out a lot. But yeah.
It's mainly safety
Yeah.
for pedestrians or safer crossings.
Yeah. All right. So so I see now there are two ends. So I'm not sure if these are for questions or comments, but we can start with Daniel.
Or if there's still hands up from saying that the poll didn't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So I think we can talk about next steps and then I can open the floor for any further
Okay.
discussion.
Yes. Let's do that.
So in terms of next steps, we will be taking all the feedback we receive here today, refining our recommendations and finalizing the draft transportation master plan report. We will be looking to present the report to council after, and then typically the report would be posted on the project webpage for a 30-day or more comment period before being finalized and adopted, at which point we would issue a notice of project completion. As I mentioned previously, we are available to receive comments at any time during the study, so please feel free to reach out to either Francois or John using the contact information here or through the project webpage. So with this, I will hand it off to Francois and John if either of you have anything else to add, and if not, we can open the floor for discussion.
I don't really have anything specific to add. Thank you to the representatives from Aegis and Mobicon for walking us through that. My only comment would be just to further elaborate on Anya's comment that once the draft report is prepared, it will be posted online on our project page through the Town of Arnprior's website, which then links you to our Zen City project page. So there'll be a fair bit more information that you can filter through if you're so interested in one aspect or another of the project. There will be a little bit more detail in the draft report, which you're welcome to go through and certainly share any comments, questions, concerns with myself or Francois from Aegis, and we will do our best to respond to those questions before we finalize the report. So thank you everyone for attending.
Okay, we have two people who have their hands up. So Karen, you have a question? Sorry, you're on mute.
There we go. Oops.
No, mute again.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Now you
Okay.
can.
I guess I'm just looking at, obviously, as you prepare moving forward with things, the growth that is being kind of utilized for the sake of the study, just watching how the town is exponentially growing, I'm just wondering what impact can not having the actual census numbers in, could impact on the actual outcome of what's being done. So that was kind of one. Number two, Daniel Street right now is just like I live on Edie Street. So Daniel Street, often there are like 3 lights backed up from, even where the metro is all the way down. So to start thinking of taking out left turn lanes or taking part of that area for bicycling, to me, just I don't see how that can possibly work for safety specifically. And adding more like cul-de-sacs or stopping more of what's going across the trail along William Street there. There's so many of those roads that are actually just dead ends as it is, that would it not just exacerbate Daniel Street at this point by funneling everything further in that way? And especially if you're even considering with John Street being impeded by either not going through again. The traffic is very, very busy. And as the construction is continuing up on Madawaska as well, until everybody doesn't have to shop at this end of town where Metro and No Frills are, I mean, you've got everybody funneling to here because there are no services down for groceries and most of the stores at the other end. So I guess Daniel Street, I feel to start playing around and blocking part of other roads to funnel more traffic there. I just see as maybe a negative in terms of planning moving forward. So that's my comment there.
Yeah, it's
Thanks.
noted.
Francois or Hania, do you want to take the growth factor questions, and I can take the questions about capacity on Daniel Street and the trails?
Yep. So in terms of the growth rates, we basically looked at previous trends, population trends for the town based on the Statistics Canada data we had, and also any future forecasted population numbers that we had, and basically agreed upon a growth rate with the town based on that, and forecasted all the future population and volume numbers based on those. So those were done in agreement with the town, keeping in mind all the development that's happening.
So basically, we looked at previous growth and we took that into consideration when, forecasting future growth. So it's not a perfect science. We could be lower, we could be higher, but it's what we think is reasonable.
And
But
yeah.
Go ahead, Narayan.
Yeah, so regarding the roadway capacity and cycling infrastructure, so yeah, this basically is coming back from the fact that it is a rapidly growing town. So what we looked at is, since we know there's going to be a lot more travel within the town as it grows, we need to figure out how we can accommodate all those new trips within the town and from the town to other places. So if we maintain the status quo where about 88% of the trips are being taken by car, if we continue along that path with the similar types of roadway designs we have today, that would require quite substantial road widenings. In a lot of cases in the town, as you know, there's not physically very much space, so widening the roads is not very much a desirable option. So the preferred option is to try to accommodate more of the trips by reducing that percentage down from 88 to a lower percentage. So as new people move into the town and they are taking car trips, many of which will be by car, some of the existing trips which are by car can become other types of transportation trips, such as cycling, walking, or transit. And the main advantage of this is that all three of those take up much, much less space for a given width of roadway than if you had the same number of people driving. So that's really the principle that's coming from the basically where it's coming from. So we're aiming to instead, because currently, if you're cycling around town, a lot of the time you'll end up in a spot like Daniel Street where you're really not going to feel comfortable. So even though literally all trips within the town are within 15 minutes by bike, only about 1 or 2% of the trips are actually being taken by bike. So that's the print. So the goal is to make it accessible for all ages of inabilities, which is not really something that we observe currently in the town. There are definitely streets that are, but they're bits and pieces here and there, so it's not really a consistent quality across the town. So regarding the trail crossings, yes, as you noted, there are a lot of trail crossings, and most of the streets crossing the trail are local streets. So the vision is that the principle of a local street is that it's only used for people who are going to or from a property on that street. That's just generally the intent of the streets. So, the local streets are for the residents there. And then on the opposite extreme, there's the arterial roads, which are primarily for moving people through. So it's actually inconsistent with the definition of a local street that it would be used for people driving across town. But like at the same time, if we do decide that we do want more routes for people to drive across town, then that would mean potentially changing some of the classification of some of the existing local streets to collector streets. In that case, and then those crossings across the trail would not be closed. So that is still somewhat open for discussion, right? It's not necessarily that all crossings would be closed across the trail, and like you said, if closing all of them could be a fairly significant a deviation or detour for traffic. So it's not necessarily going to be all of them that would be closed, but the general principle is that local streets should be just for local use only.
Okay, I think Daniel has a question.
Thank you for the presentation. I noticed that your only transit was from the county of Renfrew going to Ottawa. If you want to take the vehicles off of Daniel, Madawaska, we should have a town transit system that starts off at Madawaska, goes through all the new subdivisions, ends up at the only two places, like the lady has mentioned, No Frills and Metro, and they get back on the bus to go back to their home. That would alleviate tons of cars. That's part one. Part two is closing the streets on William Street. The roads off of William go up to one goes to the school, that would be Landrigan. The other one is the ones we're doing now, McDonald, and the next one go up to our neighborhood link. So by closing those, you're going to have to do a Z or a double Z to get to these locations, which to me is unacceptable as a resident. Those are my two biggest comments. Thanks again for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks. Regarding the transit route, yeah, so the proposed transit route that was for the county, again, not for the town, was along Daniel Street and along Madawaska Boulevard. So I think the route you described is actually the route that we proposed, with multiple stops within the town. So that's in contrast to the current Ontario Northland intercity bus that's there currently, which only stops by Winners and doesn't actually really go into the town, and it's completely useless for traveling within the town. And yeah, so the second, again, the comment, so again, noted your comment regarding the concern about closing all of the local streets along William Street. And again, this is comes down to what our objectives are as a town, what the objectives of the town are, in terms of balancing the desire for through motor traffic. So that would be a collector street, and versus making sure the streets are quiet, basically quiet enough for people to feel comfortable walking and cycling on the road without needing to add bike lanes on those streets.
Supplemental is going back to my transit. The number of people that go to the hospital for blood work or testing or whatever, John Street is extremely busy. You can't find parking as well. So the transit with this, I'm thinking of the minibus that does the hourly tour. You've got an hour and a half or 2 hours to get your blood work done. You get back on, you go back to No Frills, you go to Metro, you're back on the bus, and then you're gone home. It alleviates all those cars, but I see the package that you've got going through town for county, but nothing for the town specific, which we can get grants for if we have a transit system within the town, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're correct. We can get grants for that. Currently, the province of Ontario has a number of grants. And actually, that I forgot to mention that, but that is also part of our plan at the county level, or the proposal at the county level, is that they do, in addition to the route I showed, to use on-demand services. So those would be little shuttle buses, like you meant, or vans, or potentially even literal taxis. And the reason for that is just simply the number of trips, because it's a relatively small distance from the hospital to within the town. So in most cases, it would probably be most economical to have just an on-demand service where, the people who need to travel from the hospital would request a ride specifically, rather than having to run a bus all the time to the hospital, when the total number of trips we would expect to be fairly low.
I guess that's your opinion, sir. Mine's a little bit different in that the number of people that drive there and to the malls, it would be a circular thing every 2 hours. It wouldn't have to be a 24-hour service, but we have a home support service now, which is a call, make an appointment, and you could be waiting up to 3 hours to go home, where to me that's unacceptable again, where we have a mobile small bus that goes around, a municipal bus. Anyways, again, thanks for the
Yeah.
presentation and the opportunity.
No, I understand. Thank you very much. To clarify, I wasn't when I said there would be a low volume, I meant the number of people using the bus. Not we recognize that the hospital is a major attractor of trips in the town, and we did also identify that neighborhood, both with the hospital and the schools, and as well as in the summer with the just recreational travel to the waterfront. That is a very busy area, and yeah, it's just for travel within the town, then because the distances are so short to the hospital, that potentially a large percentage of those trips could be walked or cycled. So the number of people who would be attracted by a bus might be fairly low. That's the intent behind my statement, not to suggest that the number of trips are small, because we know they're very large.
Alexis has her hand. Oh, Daniel, you want to add something?
Yeah, actually, in relation. Oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Just one last comment. When did you do the demographics of how old we are in Arnprior? There's some young people, but there's a ton of oldies, and we don't cycle and we don't walk that far. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, you.
So I just wanted to follow up on Dan's comment. So I'm sitting here with a few neighbors today at the library, and we're listening in, and we quite enjoyed the bus idea. There's been new taxis that have recently started in Arnprior, and so I think there's about 4 taxis now going daily. Obviously, we see them on Daniel Street, we see them at the Metro, and we do see them at the hospital. So when we were talking about capacity and the potential need for a bus in future, is there like a potential population size that is typically used to understand whether or not a bus could be financially viable within Arnprior?
So so there's not a magic number, but yeah, I mean, the smaller the municipality, the harder it is to make it work, right? It costs. There's a price of the bus. There's a price of the. So it's you cannot break even. That's for sure. There are some major benefits, or you reduce you hopefully will reduce dependency on cars. So there are benefits for that, benefits on the environment, but yeah, for smaller municipalities, it's always a challenge. And that's why sometimes other types of service like on-demand service are popular. They can be also expensive, but yeah, the challenges are more important with smaller municipalities. It's definitely something to look more in details. The plan, I think, will say that it is a good alternative, but there will need to be more analysis, and yeah, we have to evaluate the benefits well to make sure that it makes sense for the town.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you.
And Lisa has a question, I believe.
I do. Thank you. Just following up on one of the challenges that you mentioned initially was that, and of course it has now disappeared. So the modal transportation, it's identified as being 88% vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of follows up on, I think, Dan's end as well as Alexis's. Where do taxis and our seniors transportation service fit in? Are they a part of that 88%? Or is that over and above the 88%?
So that 88% would be basically automobiles as passengers and as drivers. So this was taken from Statistics Canada data. So that has an other category that basically covers taxis and all those other modes, basically of what you mentioned. So this 88% is just personal automobiles and as a driver and as a passenger.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, that 12% would be the seniors transportation service and the taxis. That's completely unique. Okay, thank you.
However, it's worth noting that the Statistics Canada data is specifically for trip to work. So when it comes to other travel within the town, it doesn't necessarily match the trip to work data. Usually they're in the same kind of ballpark, but especially when you have a lot of seniors transportation, that can skew the numbers. So if the overall number of trips, the percentage of overall trips in the town is not necessarily 88%. Generally, based on our experience, you'd expect it to be, in the similar ballpark. Like it's not going to be 40%, but it could be maybe 80% or it could be 90%.
That's interesting. And thank you for clarifying that. Simply because when you take a look also at the fact that about 50% of people work in Arnprior and 50% are working elsewhere. Good. And I see you nodding, so you know where I'm going with this. It means that there are a number of trips that are happening in town where someone is not going to work necessarily. So
yeah.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, that's just we wish we had better data, but that's the data we have.
I do too. Thanks.
Any more questions?
I think Alexis has a question.
Hi, yeah, this is Monty Schmidt. I live on Elgin Street, down past the City Hall. I noticed that you guys have that not marked for any, that's not marked for slowing or anything. It's pretty much a straight shot from the bridge all the way out to Divisional on that street. And one of the problems there is that there's literally no crosswalk from downtown all the way out past my place, which is probably 6 blocks. And in fact, there's also a very strange intersection there right by the town hall where I saw a school bus T-bone just a few weeks ago crossing that because people go like bats out of heck on that street because there's literally nothing slowing them from downtown till you get no crosswalks, no stop signs, nothing. And so I see nothing on your map dealing with that. I mean, is this not an issue or that's my question.
No, not necessarily. It's definitely something we're going to look at. So it's a good point. And that's why we're here today. So we will look into it.
Yeah, and to clarify, that also has to do with just the general policies regarding speeding. So if people are exceeding the speed limit, that triggers interventions to resolve that.
I may want to just follow up with that as we're talking about speed limits, because there was just a mention of if cars keep to their recommended speed. Now, this is something that we had talked about in the first meeting, and I highly appreciate talking about traffic calming measures and the focus on quiet streets. As Lisa McGee had mentioned, we have about, I think, was it 80% of, or 50% rather, is trips in town, which, as we know, a significant amount of that could be done walking or biking. We live in a 15-minute city, so that would be beautiful to see, both from an environmental perspective, but also from a longevity. We know that the current way suburbs are being made is actually bad for our health, and we do not walk enough as a community. So I'm quite excited about that fact. But when it comes to those new suburbs and our traffic calming measures, I question how quickly the town can implement these changes for our new developments. So right now in our official plan, the demand is that we encourage the roads to match the existing development within the area. When I had questioned the town previously on this, I was told that the streets are currently wider as they fit our services, pipes, and service delivery. That would be including emergency services. Thankfully, we know that this is not realistic to an actual, would we say, more livable area, considering Montreal, Vancouver, and many countries within Europe are not adhering to the wide streets. And it enforces towns later on to ensure we do studies such as this, which is quite cost heavy, and we have to update our roads in future. So essentially my question is, when would this plan be completed, and when could our town start implementing these upcoming changes when we're looking at new development? So requesting that our developers adhere to these new guidelines, as well as how could we incorporate this into our rolling roads program that Arnprior currently has?
Maybe I can jump in on that one. Thanks for the question, Alexis. So the first question is, when will this plan be complete? We are targeting to have this transportation master plan completed in the next few months, pending review times and circulation. So this year, anyway, this plan is intended to be finalized. So as part of this plan as well, it's not something that we really spoke about at great length tonight. It was touched on last night in the county's presentation as well, but we have a draft policy for traffic impact studies, so criteria or guidelines that we're developing that we'll be using to provide to developers as they develop new subdivisions and new developments in town, and some of the criteria that we will require them to follow as far as doing those transportation studies in advance to determine what's needed. So that, coupled with some of the other policies that we're developing as part of this, the traffic calming policy, again, being finalized this year, we should be able to start rolling some of those requirements out and ensuring that those new developments are considering those policies when they're designing their new road networks as well. So, and sorry, the second part of your question again, Alexis?
I had read previously that we have a rolling roads program, and it's a question of, can these, though there's street design tends to progress over time, but could we foresee that some of these changes could start to be included within the rolling roads program?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just for those who aren't aware of what the rolling roads program is, it's really just the term we've used for the last number of years for our rolling road rehab. So it's really what it's been is more just rehabilitation, so patching of asphalt and doing repairs and maintenance of the surface of the road network, and also including repairs to curb and sidewalk. So it's been fairly basic in that regard. So the question being whether or not we can use some of those funds to actually implement some of these traffic calming measures. It's not really the way that we had intended it, but I personally don't see any significant concerns with potentially using some of those funds on an annual basis for some of these traffic calming measures. I mean, the Rolling Road Rehab Fund is really funded solely through the tax base. It's not like it's a rate-driven funding source like water and wastewater. So it's just 100% tax funded, which the traffic calming measures would be as well. So it's a like funding source, and whether or not we look to use some of those funds each year to do some further traffic calming measures, I wouldn't be opposed to that. That's something that we could communicate and possibly recommend to council as part of future budgets. But it's not a bad suggestion.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. It's always very helpful.
Karen has a question.
Thank you. I just was going to bring up the intersection of coming out of, we're very fortunate to have a wonderful facility like the Nick Smith Center. That said, that intersection coming out of that street onto Daniel at any given time when there are especially if the arena is taken up and the community center is taken up and there's pool activity, the traffic gets quite locked up at that at that corner. Has that been looked at, or are there alternatives in mind for going forward?
That's the intersection of James Street and Daniel Street. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
So we will consider looking into that intersection as part of the study, and then make sure we have some recommendations within the TMP.
Yeah, we'll look at it. Might have been studied. It's just we cannot cover like all those. So we'll make sure that that we'll look at it and get back to you with an answer.
I was just to clarify, so that is part of the Daniel Street Road Network, so it's part of the county's road network. So I believe it was looked at as part of the intersection. The intersection counts for the county road network, and I don't believe it triggered the warrants for signalization as of yet. But I know some of the conversations that are being had with the county. There is still some ongoing conversations with respect to the possibility of early implementation of those traffic signals, or failing that, looking at additional crosswalk or PXO locations in that area as well.
Caitlin has a question.
Thank you. Thanks to Monty, who must be a neighbor. So I live on Elgin Street West. So I really appreciated seeing the map of the streets being designated. Sorry, I'm not sure if you can still hear me.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, good. Sorry. Uh, so Elgin and Madawaska, for example, are arterial roads. And so just curious if there are, to Monty's question about the limited opportunities to cross safely, cross the Elgin all the way out to the boundary line. So it's just curious, are there restrictions to the type of, so I guess it would be pedestrian crossing or PXO design um, on those arterial road in particular? That's my question. So it's there.
Yep.
It's sorely lacking, as Monty. You kind of have to run for it, and so just speaking as a pedestrian.
Yep. So the PXO policy we prepared basically breaks down the level and the types of PXOs. And based on the intersection, we basically do the warrants and see based on like the road classification, the number of lanes and all that, we basically then recommend the level and the type of PXO that would be suitable for the intersection we're assessing.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Sorry if I could. Sorry, Alexis. Just one thought while I'm thinking about Madawaska Boulevard. And again, this might not be the place, but I'm here now and just looking forward to the sidewalk extensions out to Pillar 5. And again, sorry if this isn't the place to ask for that update of that sidewalk extension. John, thanks.
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. Thanks for the question. Certainly a project that we are anxious to see come to fruition, and certainly an area that we see a need for additional multi-use path and sidewalk for pedestrians specifically. So we are well underway on that assignment. The design has certainly been advanced through the draft stage. Really, the challenge that we're dealing with right now is dealing with the railway crossing. So, not to get into too many specifics, there's a lot of different authorities involved with that railway crossing, including the City of Ottawa and Nylene being the industry that actually leases the rail for the use of the rail. So we've had several conversations with those parties, but we're struggling to come to an agreement at this point with respect to exactly what will need to be done to bring those pedestrian crossings safely across that railway corridor. So we're continuing to have those discussions and work with our engineering firm, separate engineering firm, to work through those issues. But we are hopeful that in 2026 we may be in a position to go to construction on that project.
Thanks so much for that update. That's good. No, that must be a very challenging. Thanks for pointing that out about the railway crossing. And sorry, just one last word. The work done on McNabb, sorry, down to Niley, very nice. Everybody smile, like you go down there and people are smiling on the sidewalk. People just love it. They love it. It's a beautiful job. Yeah.
Excellent. I appreciate those
Yeah.
comments. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alexis has a question.
Yeah, I actually wanted to follow up and maybe ensure that I'm reading accordingly. Karen had mentioned originally the concern of removing left turning lanes on Daniel Street. And then we brought up the concern of the intersection on Daniel Street heading to the recreation center to Nick Smith, which would be James Street, thank you. But my understanding, and Arian, you may be able to answer this for me, is that actually removing those left turning lanes could both slow down Daniel Street, a natural barrier in the sense that people have to slow down to turn. It could allow people to get onto Daniel Street from James, and it could just make overall that intersection a little bit safer for people coming to and from the rec center. So that's the research that I've been looking at recently that actually says removing those left turning lanes could help the flow of traffic.
It could, but it could also create other problems, right? Safety, congestion. When there's congestion, people start to try to do dangerous maneuvers. So, you know,
routes.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it could play a role in, making vehicular use more complicated, but
Right.
but it could create also. So there are some benefits, but there are also many inconveniences, and I'm afraid that the inconvenience might weigh more than the benefits.
And so when there's questions like that, do you make recommendations to towns to test out some of these theories, like in the sense of like attempting one, and if that doesn't work, I mean, paint lines, though it's not ideal to be repainting our streets, but streets, as we said, like can go through transitions based on the change in our volumes, based on our population and our needs. And so do you recommend that maybe towns try one and then the other? Or?
Well, we wouldn't recommend to try something that we know will likely not work. So there's a lot of experience, and so in this case, it might not be something that we recommend doing as a pilot, but there are other options that could be tested where. But yeah, we have to be careful in what we test, in the sense that there's a lot of research and experience that show that some things don't work. So it's less necessary to test them to know that it might not be the most efficient ideas, but there's other options, and your comment is well received. We're gonna, see to try to identify, option that could be tested and maybe more suitable for the town.
Okay, I appreciate you walking me through that and sort of explaining the concerns there. I really do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Kevin just wanted to follow up here.
Another member of the library group, also a Daniel Street resident. I'm just wondering if there's been any conversation at all about restricting transport trucks using Daniel Street to get from the No Frills area down to, they've got a highway access from Madawaska to get to businesses down at that end of town. I live right at the top of the hill on Daniel Street, and they fly by. 18-wheelers, even in snow conditions, where if they get over the hill and there's a car stopped in front of them, catastrophe awaits. And a lot of communities restrict access to oversized vehicles on those. I know it's a county road, which complicates things, which frankly we get tired of hearing, but we understand it. But I'm just wondering if any conversation has been had regarding restricting oversized vehicles.
Yes, that was a recommendation that was made as part of the county's TMP. And that would be discussed in the county's report as well, where we have a map of recommendations where we're basically restricting truck access on these roads, especially that go through really busy city, like town areas.
That's wonderful to hear. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Lisa has a question.
Thank you. So the slide with the Ottawa Street conversion, it says it's recommended to convert Ottawa Street to a one-way street with on-street parking for pickup and drop-off. Contraflow bike lane should be implemented. And I'm just wondering, because there's not a lot of other data on what led to that recommendation, and were there any other alternatives reviewed or considered?
So our team basically, I did a traffic analysis, did basically the analyze in Synchro, which is the software we use to analyze traffic data. And based on that, it was recommended that it be converted to a one-way street. And since there's a school there as well, that's why it was recommended to have on-street parking there for pickup and drop off.
And the contraflow bike lane was mostly just to maintain access for people cycling. So even though the street would be one way for cars, what the contraflow bike lane mostly is there for is still to allow people to still cycle in both directions. So because we didn't want to make it less direct for people to cycle, particularly go to the schools and the hospitals, which we know are a major destination. So we want to make that as easy as possible to get to those places by ways other than driving.
Okay, no, it's I find it just interesting. It's something that we have actually discussed at council in the past, and so I'm just curious. I was curious to see what led to that. I'd love to see some more of that data. Thank you.
So thank you. I don't know if there's any more questions, but it was a good session, a lot of questions. So we see that you are interested in this plan, so which makes it exciting for us. Oh, another question.
Hi, sorry, one last thing. So I guess one of the concerns being on Daniel Street, and I understand why so many people use it. If they're exiting town, they want to get to the highway access, so they use Daniel Street. Is there any reason we're not looking at trying to divert that traffic to Division Street, which is on the edge of town, which it has an overpass over the highway, which does have a lot of empty fields that would make it easier to access? Because I think the reason a lot of people get frustrated they're using Daniel Street is because that's the only path that they have available to them. If they had an alternate route that was less cumbersome and gave them the access that they're looking for, I'm just wondering if any thought has been given to looking at using that road, which is very sparse in terms of housing, children using the roadway, etc. Anyway, just wanted to get that in there.
Just
Thank
so
you.
you know, the Elgin Street group would be opposed to that.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my comments to add as well. I think it's challenging to encourage motorists to go kind of that far out of their way without drastic measures to really make it difficult and slow for them to go down Daniel, which isn't necessarily impossible. But so the other residents comment jokingly, I mean that's something that we talked about several months ago when this question came up before, and really I think what we'd be doing is really just moving a similar problem or concern with respect to traffic volumes from Daniel over to Elgin, which is a very similar type of neighborhood, arterial county road with residential properties, very close proximity to the street. So we'd probably just be pushing the problem elsewhere.
So I don't know, John, if there's if there's no more questions, we could remind everyone that you can still reach out to us if you have any more questions. You'll have a few weeks. There's the webpage. And I think there's going to be other channels that we can use. Maybe Anya, is there?
The project webpage and also your emails.
Yeah.
So they can reach out to John or you if there's any other concerns. And the meeting has been recorded, so this
Yeah.
will also be posted to the
Yeah.
town's webpage as well.
That's it. So, John, do you final words?
Yeah, if there's no more further questions, just take a minute to thank everyone for attending. Some good discussion that was had there, some good questions, a few takeaways for sure on our side to further discuss amongst this project team, and a few comments I've jotted down just to further discuss with the county, as well as was evident tonight. A lot of the concerns and challenges with transportation in Arnprior do directly intertwine with the county road networks being the main arterial roads through Arnprior. So a lot of those discussions do need to go hand in hand with decision making at the county level as well. So but once again, thank you everyone for your interest and for your contribution to the discussion this evening. And again, if there's any further questions, follow up, or comments, by all means, feel free to send myself an email, contact me by phone here at the town hall, and we will certainly do our best to provide you with answers or clarity on any questions or comments that you might have. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.